I don't want to invoke any kind of medical reaction. We're going to get to 100 in no time. Well, probably around 50 weeks. Episode 50. Welcome everyone. I never thought I'd get here. You probably listened and thought he'll never get to episode 50. And here we are. Here we are with flashing lights, hair that has been in a hat all day, and I'm going to stop the flashing lights now because I don't want to invoke any kind of medical reaction. There we go. Let's put this light on. It is indeed episode 50 of the Birdie Golf Club podcast, and I thought I'd do a little something different today. For those of you that have been along for the ride, and those that may be joining, might be your first time here. Thank you so much for listening to me in your ear holes. It really is, or watching. If you're on YouTube or Spotify, you might be watching, but it really is amazing. I honestly never ever saw the podcast get into episode 50, if I'm honest. Like, I tried to just take it one step at a time, but there's been plenty of times along the way where you feel like stopping. But to be here now, and the fact that it's kind of a first real milestone, to be honest, with podcasting, episode 4 is a milestone, because it takes work and you're learning along the way. Now the process is a little bit easier than it used to be. It's a bit easier for me to make connections than what it once was, but it's just so exciting. I started my dream job basically pretty much at this point last year, and that was this. To be able to talk about golf to people, to be able to learn about people and learn about their stories, and to have something which is truly mine that I can share then with you guys is really, really exciting. So, wow, here we are. There's no guest this week. It's just going to be me rambling on a little bit. So if you're bored now, I understand. You can leave. It's fine. I totally get it. You've done enough. You've listened, and I appreciate it. But if not, then stay tuned, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process of how this podcast is made, what it takes, and maybe some of my highlights from the year as well. Like I said, if it is your first time here, make sure if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you don't miss an episode of the podcast. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then make sure you hit that follow button. And if you can, leave a 5-star review. If you want to leave less than a 5-star review, I'd maybe ask you don't leave it, just for selfish purposes. And equally, if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with your friends and with your family. It means a lot to me, the feedback I get, and that people are enjoying it. And actually, one of the funny ones is they enjoy these little, solo podcasts, which is cool. I guess that takes me to my first point, is that I know what it's like. If you're listening to this podcast, and I always envisioned it being somebody at work listening to this podcast, because that's what I do. My regular job is that I'm a window cleaner. I have been for basically 20 years, and it's a very lonely thing, let me assure you. And there's plenty of other jobs around the world that people do that are maybe lonelier, or of the same level of loneliness, and it can be really difficult sometimes to get through a day. And to be honest, podcasts have been a huge addition to my life, really, because they've enabled me to feel like I'm not alone when I'm sort of doing my job, which has given me so much. Like, my secular job has given me so much, but at the same time, it can be pretty soul destroying doing the same pretty monotonous task over and over again. And to be able to get through your day a little bit quicker by listening to people having a conversation about something that you're interested in, or something new, or just feeling like you're a fly on the wall of a conversation, can be huge. Can be huge for your mental health, really. And that's not something I thought I'd ever really admit to. I was brought up in a very traditional sort of 90s family where, mental health was never really discussed. And I think I still carry that with me now, where I have a feeling of, what's the best way of putting it? Sort of not believing it in some way, which I hope resonates with some people. Otherwise, I'm just going to seem really cruel. But that's kind of how life was. Mental health wasn't really taken that seriously. But you can see, without somebody to talk to or something to listen to, or feeling like you're part of some kind of community in a sense, when you're going about your day-to-day activities, that people really struggle. So I know that podcasts have definitely helped me with just passing the time, as part of it, but also then having something to look forward to in your day whilst you go about whichever job, or whether you're going to do the shopping and watching all the prices going up and feeling pretty devastated about that every single week, or whether you're going for a walk and this is something that you need to help you focus on, supporting your physical health. Maybe you're at the gym, whatever it may be. It's really amazing to have you listen to this podcast. And right now it is a small community, but if that can grow and that can be organic and not forced, then that's a really lovely thing. And the idea of my silly words and the guests that I have on and everything like that being a positive in someone's life is incredibly powerful. So, episode 50, here we are, but trust me, we're not going anywhere. We're going to get to 100 in no time. Well, probably around 50 weeks. But we're going to get there, and it's going to be amazing. And I didn't know whether to really celebrate episode 50, if I was honest. Like it's a milestone, but it's one I almost didn't want to recognize because it's never been about a number. It's just been about being consistent. And on a personal note, I'm just really happy that the podcast has stayed consistent. We all know the world of golf is not consistent, and your golf game is definitely not consistent. So having this as a constant that I was dedicated to, and has definitely improved my willingness to get tasks done, I think it's been huge. And also I understand a little bit better now because, with window cleaning, it's quite easy in many ways. Or maybe I'm not looking at that in the right way, but it's quite easy to start around, get around and go from there. And then just keep it up. It's not too difficult a task, and it's all I've ever known. But going into this, which was a bit of an unknown for me, was scary. But I always had in my head that I just wanted to start, and I knew if I started that I could then grind and get it done. And don't get me wrong, it has not been a grind really. There's been moments when it comes to like editing and social media, which is a whole other facet of this thing which I hadn't really accounted for. That there can be moments where it's difficult, but the actual podcast in itself, I assure every single one of you listening, I love talking to every single one of the guests that I've had on. There's been some standout guests, of course, but the stories that have come from it and the moments and the sort of, the camaraderie as well that goes on in the golf world, being able to reach out to these people, check in, see how they're doing, and equally the same back has been incredibly rewarding. So for that, I'm very, very thankful. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other things that I wanted to say really to sort of wrap a bow on this episode 50. I guess probably one of the best ways is I was looking up some quotes which maybe just applied. And I think if you're listening to this now, and there's probably plenty of people listening that are in the creative space or that love their golf, maybe they're in a job which they might look at and go, well, this job's providing and it's doing great, but do I want to be doing the same thing in 10 years' time? Then a quote that I came across from The War of Art, which is a Stephen Pressfield quote. Are you paralyzed with fear? That's a good sign. Fear is good. Like self-doubt, fear is an indicator. Fear tells us what we have to do. Remember one rule of thumb. The more scared we are of a work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it. And I thought that really well sums up. I mean, don't get me wrong, truly a scary thing to do podcasting, but the elements that go into it are scary. Having to approach people cold pretty much the whole time, having to put yourself out there. There's moments with this podcast where, because I like it to feel like a free-flowing conversation, I try not to prepare too much because I feel like it's then a bit obvious that I'm sort of like an interviewer in many ways, which isn't really the vibe I wanted. It's natural that it does fall into a little bit more of an interview style because, the person I'm talking to is more interesting than I am. So I want to ask them questions, but I wanted that to come around naturally. But there's honestly moments where I've been sitting here before, and I'm sitting in the waiting room waiting for the podcast guest to enter, and there's just on the app I use, there's this moment where the second screen goes away, and that's when you know they've joined the room, and then it takes a few seconds and then they'll appear. And every single time I get that sort of like feeling in my stomach where I'm nervous, and I sort of doubt whether I'm capable of asking the right questions, of maintaining their interest for upwards of an hour most of the time with podcast guests. This episode is brought to you by ShotScope, the golf tech that actually helps you play better. Whether it's their rangefinders, GPS watches, or stat tracking sensors, everything's built to give you real insights into your game without the faff. I've been using ShotScope myself, and honestly, once you see where you're gaining and losing shots, it changes how you approach every single round. And you can get 15% off any order with the code BirdieGolfClub at checkout. Just head to shotscope.com, use the code, and start playing smart. And that feeling is two things. It is obviously that frightening feeling, that fearful feeling, but also it's exciting. I think you have to embrace it. Essentially, if you're starting something and you are nervous, then as that quote from Stephen Pressfield says, then you have to do it. You have to do it, and you've got to do it to what you want it to be as well. That's the important thing. Maintain your vision, and obviously you have to adapt, and you have to maybe reassess things. But maintaining a clear vision of what you want to do is really, really important. And I think on the assessing things front as well, it's quite difficult for me to assess the podcast in many ways. It's very difficult for me to listen back. I don't listen back too often, if I'm honest, unless I'm just trying to remember some points that I found interesting. So I try not to too much, because I don't want them to be the same thing every episode, and I want it to feel natural. But it's kind of really tricky for me to put it into like the algorithm of what a podcast should be and how it can improve. That's where having a co-host can be really helpful, because you can bounce ideas off each other and do things like that, which would be really handy, of course. But I think what would be a great help is if you're listening to this podcast and you are enjoying it, please, by all means, reach out with any ideas you have. I'm not going to take every single one of them, because it might not align with what my overall vision is for the podcast. But if there's things you enjoyed, things you didn't enjoy, please send an email over. birdiegolfpod@gmail.com is where you can reach me. And yeah, it would mean a lot to just hear from the listeners. There's been a few that have contacted, and that's awesome. But two, I love ideas. And if I can get inspiration, or, direct inspiration, or sort of like ricochet inspiration from your idea, then that's amazing. That's only going to make the podcast better. But that's quite a daunting thing about doing something alone, is that, am I just putting something out that no one's interested in? So to see the follower count go up week on week, to see the listener count steadily increase over the months has been really amazing, really amazing. I'm trying to think now of just some of the highlights of the podcast as well, throughout the time, and I'm going to miss people out, and I'm really sorry, but I'm trying to just do it on the spot here, because I wanted to not have like a huge section of notes. Obviously the most listened to episode of the podcast so far was the episode with Scott Fawcett, and that was a real moment for the podcast. I believe that was episode 23. So bear in mind, at that point we've done 4 months of podcasting at that point, and to suddenly have someone of Scott's caliber join the podcast, and somebody that's as renowned in the world of golf as Scott is with the Decade System, that was incredibly nerve-wracking. I couldn't believe that Scott replied, to be honest, to little old me, and also I couldn't believe how gracious he was with his time as well. I mean, we talked for over an hour, and he was so great with it. I asked him questions which I'd seen maybe in other podcasts that he wasn't as comfortable answering. Scott focuses mainly on the professional side of the game. So when it comes to the amateur side of the game, it's just not that it's not in his wheelhouse, but it's just not really something he's that bothered about, when it comes to the Decade System. But he still answered the questions, and he gave great tips. And literally the week after that those tips led me to break 80 for the first time. I broke 80 playing alternate shot, which I think is probably a greater achievement. It was me, I was playing off 12 at the time, and my playing partner was playing off 16, 17, I believe, at the time. And we broke 80 playing alternate shot, and I hit some great shots, kept it very decade about how I was doing thing. And then the next morning, went out, broke 80 on my own ball, shot 78. And, it's no coincidence that after speaking to a mind like Scott Fawcett and how brutal Scott can be as well sometimes with the way he puts things, but it's brilliant. It breaks golf down into a very simple way of looking at things and a humble way of looking at things as well. So I mean, Scott was fantastic, and I definitely would love to have Scott back on. I did talk to him about coming back on actually, and he was open to coming back on the podcast. It's just the subject matter wasn't. He put it very simply. It's just not that interesting, and that was about the Ryder Cup, And again, Scott being very honest, and it turned out he was kind of right in his assessment anyway. It just wasn't that interesting a subject when it came to the stats and things like that. So we'd love to have Scott back on at some point. But that was a real standout moment to me. I can't forget, obviously, one of the first guests I had on that wasn't just part of my friendship group was Ali Marr, who started Club 36. Talk about somebody who is personifying that quote from War of Art. Ali had literally, he's got a young kid, busy guy with work and everything like that as well. He started the Bearded Golfers YouTube channel, and then also decides to start Club 36 Collective, clothing brand. And he's doing all this, he has a partner that helps him with it as well, but a lot of the work himself as well on that, Ali. And, to talk to someone that literally is diving in the deep end. I'm giving up my time doing this podcast. That's really one of the main contributions that it takes to start a podcast is time. If you've got the equipment, which I fortunately already had, then it is just time. Ali's putting so much more into it, and to see the success of, I believe Club 36 sold out at one point, and now it's a restock in its first year. That's incredible. To do that and to make a success of it, and to see where it goes next is going to be really interesting. And Ali was a great guest. Again, was the first guest also to put trust in me, not just from the podcast point of view, but also sending through apparel for me to promote through Instagram and things like that, and to do reviews of. And that was a whole other side of things, which was really exciting as well, the idea of that. I mean, we're all little kids at the end of the day, and to receive something through the door is always exciting. We all get excited when the Amazon guy turns up. And in the same way, I'm now very fortunate to be very excited by people trusting in me to provide reviews, to work as partners, ambassadors, whatever it may be. So yeah, huge shout out to Ali, because he was the first. Club 36 and him were the first ones to really show a lot of faith in the podcast, which was huge. Obviously, as well, at this point, probably worth addressing the fact that this podcast started as a totally different thing. It was me and my friend Ben that were just going to sit down and talk about golf every week. To be honest, we used to sit down with a glass of whiskey or two, and my head thanks me for for Ben stopping doing the podcast. If I'm totally honest, I do wake up a little bit fresher on a Tuesday morning now. But that was also a really fun time of the podcast. So fun. I remember now with these cold nights drawing in, and obviously I'm a bit wrapped up today in the booth. I remember the first time we recorded and coming out, and it was pitch black. I think we recorded like 10:30 at night. The moon was out, it was freezing cold, and I got in here and I was just so excited, like trembling with excitement about starting this thing. And we had a great conversation. We had so much fun. We recorded 3 episodes, I believe, of the podcast together before, completely fair enough, Ben realised it just didn't fit in with his schedule. It wasn't quite working out. So he couldn't carry on. But such fond memories of doing that with him. And Ben will, I'm sure, come back on the podcast at some point, and we'll have a good chat. But it was such an exciting time. And obviously when Ben couldn't do it anymore and things, there's 2 things that massively changed there. One, then you're by yourself, which we've spoken about before, the difficulties of that. And And two, obviously the format of the podcast completely changes as well, because now it's not just, cool, I've got someone I can lean on and we can just chat. We can just sit down and talk and shoot from the hip, and, you know, it's safe, it's easy, he's a mate of mine, that's fine. Then it becomes, okay, I've got to find people to talk to. People that, one, interest me selfishly as well, because you want to look forward to a conversation, but two, that have value to an audience as well, and that people can learn from, and people that are interested in talking to me as the flip side of that as well, which there's been plenty who aren't, which is also completely understandable. That was a big moment, and the podcast could have stopped, to be honest, right then. I believe I had 3 episodes with Ben that we'd recorded, and there was also an episode with Chris, who now does the Halfway Hut podcast. Chris has done great with that. Chris and Mark are doing an amazing job with the Halfway Hut. They've set up a fantastic podcast there, and it's working brilliantly. And Chris was a great guest on this podcast as well. We were able to talk about golf. Again, that was nice and easy. He's a mate of mine. Pretty simple equation. It's going to be nice and simple to talk to someone like that. So I believe there was like 4 episodes at that point in the chamber, like ready to go, because I'd pre-recorded as of like October last year, ready for release in January. And to be totally honest with you, that could have been a moment where I just sort of went, I tried, you know. It didn't work out. It is what it is. But, you know, we'll release the 4 episodes. You know, they'll probably get low view rates because no one's really interested. And then that will give me a reason to stop. That could have been my mindset, to be honest. And it, you know, being frank, it was close to it at times. Because, you know, it was stressful. The idea of trying to find guests was a stressful proposition. Fortunately, I'd already made contact with Ali, so that was already done. That sort of almost gave me a bit of an oomph to carry on. So Ali, if you're listening, you're huge to this podcast getting off the ground, mate, to be honest. So thank you. But I thought, you know what? I wanted to do this. So now let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let's stop talking about it. Let's do it. And that basically set the wheels in motion. I've never been as active on Instagram. I never want to be as active on Instagram as what I was over that winter. About sort of 10 months ago, and just, you know, lining up guests, reaching out to companies, reaching out to people that interested me. I've probably Instagram messaged. I mean, if Justin Rose ever ends up on this podcast, I've got her address. The incredibly embarrassing direct message archive that it'll have of me going like, "Hey, we'd love to have you on the podcast." But that's what you do. You know, I had no idea how this space works, and I just shot from the hip pretty much of like, hey, that's that person, I'm going to message them. And if there was a bit of a sort of brick wall in place, then, you know, you try and find other means, you leave a comment. Honestly, you almost have to have no shame when you're just trying to get the best guests you can. That's kind of how you have to play it. And through those means, I mean, we've met some amazing people on this podcast. I'm thinking of, you know, one of the next sort of early people I spoke to, Martin Maritz, played on the DP World Tour for like 12 years. Was an incredible golfer. Now is doing incredible things with his company, Birdies and Bogies Golf Gear. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, I'd have never ever spoken to Martin before, never heard of his story really. I might have come across him as a professional golfer at some point, but to now have, Martin's been on the podcast twice, I believe. Did a podcast with him talking about how to plan your round strategically, which you can find. And, you know, we'll direct message each other, check out each other are. I'll check how he's doing. How's everything going with Birdies and Bogies? When's he going to get on the senior tour? You know, all these things just from a conversation, which has been epic. I'm actually just going to have a quick look now. I'm going to have a quick look, looking back on some of the people that we've had on the podcast. So we've spoken about, we obviously had Ben and Chris, obviously early doors. I had Chris on twice actually, and then we had Ali. How could I forget Simon Lino from Runner Golf? I mean, I saw this putter on Instagram and I thought that thing looks totally different to everything that's out there and cool and makes sense. I need to talk to these people. talked to Simon. We had a great conversation. We sort of kept going back and forth, like talking, and I was like, runner seems great. And then boom, before I know it, Simon sends me out one of his putters with the Birdie Golf Club podcast logo on it. And it's the best putter I've ever had. I'd encourage every single one of you, check out Runner Golf. It's unbelievable what Simon's doing, and he's completely changed the game when it comes to putters. But for him to value me and this podcast to the point where he's willing to send me one of his putters because he wants to see me game that putter and he wants me to relay that information to you. So cool, and such a nice guy. And they've got new headquarters being built, and I'm going to head out there in probably March or April of next year, and there'll be, you know, a lot more from that you guys will see, because Runner's not going anywhere. I then did my first podcast on the road. Went to 9x9. Those guys were amazing again. Just taking the time to show me the facility, to show me through a fitting session. And I'm not a special golfer. You know, I'm 10 handicap at the moment. These guys made you feel special, and we're able to do the podcast from there on the road. I made some complete mistakes. Took this microphone with me. It was facing around the wrong way. The dot was on this side. Honestly, you could barely hear me for most of the episode. But they were great. They were honestly such great guests. We've had some just unbelievable people. Michael Halpin from Low Chaser, you know, a guy again putting it out there. He wanted to make these golf grips. He's doing it all off his own back with a full-time job, works in the evenings. Show support for these people. These people are the backbone of golf, honestly. So Low Chaser Golf, head over and check him out. The guys from Speed Sticks were awesome as well. Learned so much from them about how to gain some speed. Marker Locker, had those guys on. Again, they're innovating in the golf space, trying to find something. And then obviously we went Lance Reader, Crank Golf. What a year Crank have had. I mean, you've seen John Daly now repping Crank, some repping Crank. More and more tour pros, I'm sure, are going to pick up Crank drivers, Crank mini drivers, woods, and play them. Lance spoke just nothing but truth for a whole hour of conversation. And for somebody who's a CEO, a founder, to take the time and talk to me on the podcast and relay that information to you guys was so cool. And then another step further, Crank are now partners of the podcast. Like, took it international literally at that point. That's so cool. You know, me saying these things out loud, I don't often say these things to like myself. And it just makes me smile. Like, I'm so excited that these companies want to be aligned with my podcast, and then to pass on the details to you guys so that your games can all get better, and it can just be this collective, which is awesome. Dave Klenk, you know, he was on 2 weeks in a row. You know, the guy, he's got handsome squire, awesome leather scorecard holders, yardage book holders, and then he goes to the Masters like the following week. Like, unbelievable. Obviously spoke about Scott, people like Rowan, who came on, got his name wrong for the entire thing. But bless him, he just kept going. Frankie, little Frankie. I mean, Frankie Hardy, for Frankie on Instagram, just an absolute legend. His mum and dad are just awesome as well. Darren and Sarah, shout out to you guys. I know you listen every single week, and without the encouragement of people like you, without the support of people like you, again, would I have kept going? I'm not quite sure. And this isn't like a sign. It sounds like, would I kept going and I'm done. But so great. And Frankie's a little legend. He's going to go so far in the games. Unbelievable golfer. And I'm hoping to play with him at some point, play some golf. John from SRV, an unbelievable story that resonated so deeply with me. I lost my dad to a cancer battle. His mum he lost to a cancer battle, and he wanted to not just stop there, he wanted to then show support for cancer charities through making the best golf glove that you can buy. And John's just an absolute beauty of a human being. Matty, like the alt golfer on Instagram, Matty is one of the nicest guys you're going to find in the golf space, and he's an awesome follower on Instagram. And his story about sobriety and just how golf literally saved his life was his comments. Just such a great guy, and it was awesome to meet him. And we're going to play some golf together at Old Fawns next year, which is going to be awesome. Then obviously, the Instagram side of things came into it, and, me and my wife were able to head down to Mannings Heath, and we were able to stay in the hotel there, enjoying the wine tour. I got to talk to Nick Scott, who was on the podcast, got to play golf at the beautiful Waterfall golf course. Just some beautiful experiences from this podcast, which has just been awesome. I'm rattling through them, but you're here for it. It is what it is. If you haven't listened to some of these episodes, go back, listen to them. These people are amazing. They've got amazing stories. Nick especially has got some unbelievable stories from his time of playing professional golf. Scotty Pearman, I mean, when would I have ever got a chance to speak to a world long drive athlete? We're worlds apart, but he's just such a nice guy. An amazing story about his son as well, and the battle that his son had, and how that inspires him to just keep going, raising money for charities, showing support, and just being an unbelievable athlete. I think Scotty finished second in World Long Drive this year. Just awesome. And then we go on to sort of more of the social media guys as well that I've been able to connect with, and their stories. Those guys are putting in the same amount, if not more, work than I am, and I know what that takes. We've got Cam Widener, who was just a great guest, some great advice for people getting into the content creation space. Just go for it, golf on Instagram. Obviously got Josh Coates as well, Ping It on Instagram. You want to see somebody who's entrepreneurial, go and check out Josh. Like, that guy knows how to start the grind and just keep going. And he's up to something every single day, and he's inspirational in that way. Neil Williams as well does some amazing work on Instagram. He's a coach with a huge smile on his face, and I absolutely love talking to him. Drew Reynolds, the COG coach, just some fantastic information relayed in a perfect way, and that's what he's all about. And he's all about the mental side of the game and how we can get these cogs turning in the right way in our head and not mess it up too much. Obviously then had David Corrie as well, Crank Ambassador, international music artist. I mean, never would have expected to talk to someone like David, But what a guy. What a guy, and so gracious with his time, so complimentary about the podcast and everything. And it's awesome to connect with him and enjoy it. And then we've got Giles Evans, who played professional golf, who's playing professional golf right now on the Clutch Pro Tour. I saw him in person, was impressed with his game, reached out to him and wanted to connect with the podcast so you guys could learn a little bit more about the actual realities of professional golf. Paul Muse, golf performance and fitness, got to learn from him, learn how to hit the ball a hell of a long way through athleticness and being fit. And, Paul, if you're listening, mate, I joined a gym. All right. Project ramp up speed has started and just get into some kind of shape. And then obviously we're leading up to the Ryder Cup, and I reached out to a good friend Dave Klenk and said to him, you're a big New York guy, you're in the metropolitan area, can you point someone in my direction, or point me in the direction of somebody to talk to about Bethpage Black? And bam, there he goes, Dan Frankel, Metropolitan PGA head of junior golf, on the podcast. Things like that are so cool. And Dan was such a legend such a nice guy as well. And I spoke to him post Ryder Cup and sort of said, what are your thoughts? And he said, I thought the event went so well. It's just a shame that obviously a few people have led to this big narrative of it being just a disgraceful crowd. And he's like, 'cause I assure you that was not how it was there. And I completely agree with him. I thought it was unfair that everyone got painted in the same light, which is not okay. And then we talk about Isaac as well. Isaac, who's doing amazing work in Uganda to bring the game to people. I heard him on the Foreplay podcast, and I was like, I've got to talk to this guy. And him giving me the time to talk to me was awesome as well. Then we move on to another channel partner, ShotScope, and we've got Jen Saxton on the podcast, an unbelievable female golfer who is she's all about stats. She's a ShotScope through and through, and it was so cool to partner with ShotScope, to have Jen on, and the future guests that are going to be on because of that ShotScope partnership are really exciting as well. So, we're getting towards the end. Lee Brennan. Lee is such a lovely guy. He's given me some amazing tips as an entrepreneurial man himself, and just one of the nicest guys that you're going to meet in the golfing social media space, and he's really just going for it. Check him out at LA Golf Channel. And then last week with Fraser, somebody that I get to speak to a little bit more often, being the head pro at my local golf club, and to be able to sit down with him, learn a bit more, was just amazing. So that's pretty much taken us up to date, and there's so many exciting guests coming up soon. So I hope you are looking forward to it and enjoy it. do you know what? I don't know what else to really say. I mean, think I've spoken enough. You're probably sick of my voice now. But like I said, I started my dream job last year, and we're not at a point where it's a sustainable thing unto itself where I can dedicate so much time to it. But we're getting there. You know, we've taken those steps, and a friend of mine said to me, you know, Phil, who's on the podcast, was like, mate, look where you are now compared to where you were when you first started, and the expectations and the goals that you have now for the podcast compared to where it was. And that's so true. It's so true. I set very realistic expectations for the podcast, which we have surpassed, which is awesome. And to be honest, I haven't really set many goals over the past month or so because I've just been in the process of, right, head down, let's get the podcast, you know, the standard of the podcast up and everything like that. But it's definitely time to reassess and set some new goals. Being partnered with ShotScope, Crank, Golf Escapes. This episode's sponsored by Golf Escapes, the people who make booking your next golf getaway ridiculously easy. I recently stayed at East Sussex National through them, and honestly, the whole experience was spot on. Great course, great hotel, and all sorted without any stress. If you're planning your next trip, head to golfescapes.com and use the code Birdie Double Points to get double escape points on your booking. That's Birdie Double Points at checkout, and start looking forward to your next golf escape. You know, having those guys willing to put trust in me to do reviews of places like East Sussex National that me and my wife went to, and being able to share the experience with her is so important as well, because this is if it was just me coming out here and doing this and, you know, the opportunities it affords to me, it would always feel a little bit selfish. But being able to go to places with her and spend time with her because of this and the opportunities that it's going to afford to us is really, really exciting. I can't wait until my son is older and he can be part of this podcast, you know, and it can be something that we can do together. Would be awesome. You know, that would be a funny listen, let me assure you, especially right now at 5, it probably won't really work as a format. It's only so many times somebody can say fart before you probably would not find it as funny as what it is. I mean, fart is quite funny. But look, it's amazing. Before we know it, I'm sure we'll be at 100. But until then, I hope to continue to bring you great guests, great information, great content, and if I can be that person that podcast was to me, that kept me company whilst I was carrying out a task, or where you're on a long drive, or whatever it may be, then that's amazing. If you've made it to this section of the podcast, you are dedicated. So thank you ever, ever so much. And just a huge shout out to every single one of you that supported along the way, whether that be family, friends, whether it be people that have appeared on the podcast, whether it be ones that have sent kind messages, whoever it may be. I'm sure I'm missing out people, and I'm so sorry if I have missed you out. But thank you so much. I really do mean that. And I hope you're all doing well. I hope you all continue to do well. I know things aren't easy in anyone's life, so reach out if you've got anything wrong, whatever it may be. Remember that this golf podcast is a community as well, and you care for people in your community. That's what you do. I think that's it. Got an exciting guest for you all next week. We're going to have Hannah Holden on the podcast, who is a rising YouTube star, and she is a fantastic guest, ShotScope ambassador as well. And it's going to be really interesting learning from her. And I hope you all look forward to it and enjoy it. But until then, that's it from me. I'll see you all next week.